the John Fredericks Radio Network, FM 99.1, 103.9 in Chicago. Now on Dish Channel 219 with AmericasVoice.news, which is the streaming platform of the Trump Revolution. On Newsmax TV, now in 70 million homes, given the great work of Chris Ruddy and the team down in Florida. Also in Nexus.org, IRRS, and the 250 million people throughout the world, English-speaking people in Africa, Latin America, India, Russia, Eastern Europe. And later in the day in Mandarin, subtitled by G News, G Media, GTV, blown through the firewall, that those folks that want to breathe the air of freedom in mainland China can hear it. I want to thank everybody now with over 8.5 million downloads and, 100 million views. War Room Pandemic. We're very honored. Matt Gaetz is in the house. Haven't had Brother Gaetz since Madeline Peltz. We did this just for you. The Media Matters crew. We brought him back. He was only on impeachment, but we brought him back just for you, for all the Madeline, we wouldn't have done this if it had not been for Media Matters telling us how much they hate this show. You think you hate it now, you wait till the next half hour, okay? Because they're going to rub your nose in it. Gaetz, first,
we love being defined by our enemies.
No, we love
Steve?
it. We love it. First off, Gaetz, I said you're one of the smartest guys. You should be the next speaker. But you have, this is amazing. I haven't seen you in a couple of months and the thing. You've lost 40 pounds? You were in great shape before. It wasn't like you were, but you were in fabulous shape.
I've lost 40 since my height in Congress, 30 since the pandemic began. And I don't run.
Move up to that mic.
I don't run, jump, lift, or anything particularly well. The only thing I do well is think. And so if my brain couldn't control the rest of my body and stop it from eating, what good was it anyway? And so I just tried to use a little willpower.
Stop. Hannity, they got all these keto diets and all this stuff.
What about copper? Is there a copper diet?
There's everything. You've done this just through willpower?
I was like day and a half in to the quarantine. I'd eaten like 4 bowls of mac and cheese and had watched 3 episodes of The Sopranos, and I knew this was going one way or the other. I was either putting on 30 or taking off 30, and my mom had said I'd put on a little weight when she saw me on television, and I said, "Mom, the camera adds 10 pounds," and in her typical wit, she said, "Well, how many of them were pointed at you?" So I am glad to be on the better side of that.
Hold it now. I've got the Bob Costa, the coffee and the long walks. You literally just did this by cutting your food intake?
Yeah, I just I eat less and I do try to move a little bit more.
Wow. Okay, let's get to the.
Speaking of moving, FISA.
Let's talk.
How's that for a transition?
Let's talk to issues of the day. Talk to us about FISA.
I suspect to hear an announcement that the Democrats will pull the FISA vote today, and it will not occur as a consequence of the president's tweet.
We're breaking news right now. What do you mean they're going to pull the vote? You guys are back here for one reason, aren't you?
Well, there are a number of other suspension votes that are up this week, but the major reason was the reauthorization of various FISA authorities. The House passed a bill that I would not have voted for, sent it to the Senate. Only 2 Republicans voted against this bill in the Senate. Richard Burr, now disgraced, and Rand Paul, for very different reasons. Burr wanted no changes, Paul wanted a lot of changes, but it just shows you that there was a lot of consensus around that bill. That bill catches the Lee-Leahy amendment, which converts the FISA process from a non-adversarial process, which we saw totally was susceptible for abuse, to an adversarial process. So the neocons hate that, right? Like the Richard Burr, the Liz Cheney crowd that is very comfortable with the surveillance state. And they are now not accepting the fact that the president's tweet means that we need to move more in the direction of reform. They actually want to take the work product that Senator Lee, someone who I think is a civil libertarian, believes in the Constitution, they want to take those Lee reforms out of the bill and neuter them to make it easier for the surveillance state to collect bulk data without probable cause. And so I am glad that the president has shown leadership and is calling for the release of more information. I'm disappointed that hasn't happened yet under Christopher Wray, but I am guarded that this moment is not necessarily a victory for us. We have to ensure that we continue to make progress. And I break it all down on my podcast, Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz, that I hope everyone will subscribe to and rate 5
Now
stars.
we get the real reason that Gaetz is here to market the podcast. That's smart. That's good. We love the podcast. And what I love about the podcast, you actually go through issues and break it down. But for our audience that may not know all the details, pull the camera back. What is this argument about? Why was FISA put in? Why did it become a big deal? What's the controversy? And here's what's so amazing. you've got different elements that are combining to be on one side or this and not, that are not traditional as people think about Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, there are no votes here that are partisan votes. There are Republicans and Democrats on both sides. So it's really kind of the.
And how do those two camps break down?
I think it's largely the neocons on the side of the surveillance state, and it's more the civil libertarians on the side of reform. And then there are, a number of people who sort of gravitate to one of
walk
those
through
two
the
camps.
argument. Pretend you're Liz Cheney. Walk through her argument of the
I just heard it.
surveillance and whether the neocons argue why this is good for America and Americans.
Liz Cheney made the argument to Republicans this morning that when you create an adversarial process, which is what I believe should happen, you create a permanent cadre of bureaucrats and lawyers to go and tweeze away at the government's case, and that doesn't yield more accountability and transparency, it yields less. That's her argument. The reason that is deeply flawed is that the alternative is functionally authoritarian. When you have the government untested making their case to subject their citizens to that which would not be constitutional
And you're
otherwise.
saying adversarial, non-adversarial in these courts.
Yeah.
Explain to people what a
Right,
FISA
so-
court is and why you want it. What's adversarial we got to argue versus where it just gets stamped.
The way that they screwed President Trump was by having a process wherein the government's agents and lawyers could use bad information, could alter that information, and then could recertify that information even when they knew it was false. And they did it alone with a judge in secret. So if it's going to be in secret, it at least shouldn't be alone. There should at least be a person saying, well, wait a second. Where are the Woods procedures in this file? What is the predicating evidence? Who are the
But this is why I
subsources?
think 90% of Americans don't understand. How do we even get into a system of secret courts? Walk people through how do we even in a process in the United States of America, particularly with Democrats who used to be the libertarians, right? How did we get into a situation that there even is a concept of secret
we
courts?
went too far after 9/11. Look, I mean that is the answer, right? I mean,
Why? And 9/11 triggered the fact that we needed these to fight terrorism. We needed to move quickly to fight terrorism.
there was a knee-jerk reaction after 9/11 to create this permanent infrastructure to be able to deviate from a judicial system that has worked for our country for hundreds of years in order to deal with this acute problem. I don't believe that we should deal with terrorists in a judicial setting. I have the Trump doctrine in my heart, which is that you go take them out on the battlefield, but then you don't go and move in with your enemy for 20 years hoping to realign their worldview. You pop the bully in the nose and then you come home and you let them think twice before they hit you again. And that's what, I think that some people who wanted to expand the surveillance state used 9/11 to grow and seize a bunch of power and territory in Washington, D.C., and now some of the folks who've grown comfortable with that as a way of life in America are not willing to give it up easily.
Are you remembering the scene in Man for All Seasons where Thomas More has got the young guy who's courting his daughter, and this guy's saying, "Hey, I'll chop down every law to get to the devil," and he turns around and he says, "What happens when the devil turns around? You won't have any institutions and no laws to do it." In this great war that the Chinese are fighting, information economic war, do you need the FISA courts? Do you still need secret courts? Do you need these FISA courts as a concept? Forget whether it's adversarial or not adversarial. This was set up by the Patriot Act, I believe, right?
Yes.
Do you believe you need these secret courts going forward?
I believe we could totally accomplish our national security objectives without them. I believe that there are other tools at our disposal that do not require us to spy on American citizens without a warrant and have bulk collection of data in the absence of the probable cause that we would otherwise demand.
That's what this is about spying on American citizens, right?
Yeah, and look, the Inspector General has already testified before Congress that not just in the Trump case, but in all of these other cases that were reviewed, there were none of them where there weren't substantial problems in the file.
If you took Trump derangement, this is the point I'm trying to get at. If you look at, particularly as Democrats have been civil libertarians, if you took Trump derangement syndrome out of this, we would not be having this argument. Wouldn't people be, except for the Liz Cheneys and the super hardcore neocons?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a fight that's been bubbling. I mean, you've got kind of the Rand Paul view of the world that's very focused on civil liberties, and then you do have the Liz Cheney view of the world that has a stronger stomach for those types of intrusions into people's rights for the sake of national security. And I think that fight will go on. I'm glad the president has injected himself, but we've got to watch which direction the windsock is going here. Because if the president's pause on this this legislation today is productive, that's great news. But if we backslide toward the neocons, it will not have been a positive endeavor.
And just to jump in on that question as well, Steve, I mean, if anybody could show me where Pfizer has helped with the CCP so far, then I'm willing to listen. But it does. By the way, where's your stack of books today? Because they are in your face about what they're doing. They're not. You don't need to spy on these people to learn what
Simon & Schuster.
They've got Simon & Schuster.
Have you seen, as you go through this, because you become at the cutting edge of this, so a lot of this in future years are going to say, hey, Matt Gaetz did this, Matt Gaetz said this. Are you comfortable when you've looked through the Pfizer thing, besides all the problems we had with Trump and the Trump administration and coming after us, et cetera, when you look at the rest of the Pfizer court and their track record, are you comfortable that what you're proposing would actually work for the national security of the United States and for people's liberties?
In every circumstance that we have reviewed these FISA cases, we are finding major problems where they are deviating from their own standards. So it's sort of like if you see one cockroach run across the kitchen floor, that doesn't mean if you kill that, you've solved the problem, because for every one you see, there are 10 behind the walls, and that's what we're seeing in FISA.
I want to ask a question on this. How much of this is also the government's failure to keep up with technology? And what I mean by this is I saw where the story popped up a week or so ago, the Senate amendment where they were saying it narrowly got shot down that you had to have a warrant to get someone's internet search history, for example. I just would have assumed, not knowing this, not being a lawyer or prosecutor, that you would have already had to have it, but you don't.
Did you go delete a bunch of internet search history the moment you learned that, Jason?
No. But the whole thing
that
is
doesn't work also.
Yeah. But it's I would have thought on something like this they would have already fixed this, or you would have needed a warrant. But how much of this is technology getting ahead of where the government and law enforcement are?
Well, look, we see the perfect fusion of technology and authoritarian impulses in China. Like, you want to figure out how you keep 1.5 million people in concentration camps. It's through facial recognition. It's through genetic sequencing. It's all the stuff that they're innovating that we're not. So you're right that there's a delta there. I mean, heck, I can't even keep my boomer parents home during coronavirus, and they can keep 1.5 million people locked up. And I think that's a consequence of the government having an all-in approach to those technologies.
What is the state of play? As we sit here in the war room, I know the House is back. What's the state of play today?
Right now, I believe the Democrats are working on their procedures to pull this bill. And then what you're going to see is an all-out rush on the White House from those of us who want to make sure that this pause results in more reform to FISA. And then there will be the neocons on the other side who are already lining up outside the Oval to go and try to convince the president that we need fewer reforms. And I'm confident the president will come down on the right side.
Matt Gaetz' definition of more reforms is what? What's your top three?
Number one would be a probable cause standard. You know, if you have to have probable cause, that's number one. Number two would be a true adversarial process where a lawyer can come in and question the basis, and that would truly help. And then the third are real penalties. And the reason that's number three and not number one is because, frankly, the FISA court already should have held a lot of these people in contempt, and they haven't. And so if we create, I think, a stronger penalty regime, that'll reset deterrence against the misbehavior.
Matt, average Americans are going to sit there and say, you're telling me there's a court, even if it's a secret court, that you don't need probable cause? What do you mean by that? You can just walk
ludicrous.
in. You don't need probable cause.
Right. I mean, we have established probable cause as the standard for justice in our country that applies to everyone transparently in public. It's not perfect. It just happens to be the best in all of human history. And as a consequence of 9/11, we have deviated from that. And we haven't only deviated from it before God and everyone. We've deviated from it in secret, and then we've seen the abuses. If we can't fix that, what in the hell can we fix?
In a few seconds, what would probable cause be in these courts? What would you demand that they show?
Well, I mean, you know, that's probably something I can't do in 30 seconds. But I mean, it is the standard of jurisprudence that, on criminal behavior.
We're going to come back. We're going to talk about tech, Twitter, Google, all of it. We're going to return with Matt Gaetz.
Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz. Make sure to subscribe and download.
And leave comments with Gaetz and reviews. That's what he wants, is reviews. Okay, hashtag War Room Pandemic. Go to it. Give us the questions you want to ask Matt Gaetz. We're going to return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We're at war with the most sophisticated enemy. We have an information economic war right now. They have a firewall that's financed by American capital and by American technology, and then they have the mini operations they have with the Uyghurs, but they are the surveillance state, China. You talk about, use this concept of the surveillance state when you talk about America. What do you mean by that?
I am concerned that increasingly in our country, some of the elements of our government are so concerned about the populist uprising that we see led by President Trump that they're trying to gather information on Americans. And I think that we can improve those conditions by improving the FISA process, but then also by remaining diligent in our oversight. I gotta, Steve, though, transition to what's going on Twitter right now, because it goes to the very nature of truth, right? I mean, you guys have been telling the truth on this podcast since before it was a fashionable or popular thing to understand that America could one day go into lockdown. And so getting the raw, accurate information in front of people is so critically important. It's why the president uses these social media platforms so as to not have a filter from the media.
Yeah, he disintermediated mainstream media and big media by using Twitter, going over their heads.
Right, and allowed these clear messages to get through that were so powerful that they could not be stopped by almost every establishment force in the country. Now we see that they are fighting back. And Twitter in particular is engaged in election interference in this country. You'll remember that Twitter shadow banned 4 members of Congress during the Russia hoax: Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and Devin Nunes. And
that was just random.
And by
4
the way,
random guys.
Like, they got caught by Vice. Like, they didn't get caught by one of ours. They got caught by a left-leaning news entity, and they said that was just a bug in the system that caught those 4 members of Congress only. Right? So they are putting their thumb on the scale, and the notion that they would outsource the fact-checking system to the people that have been factually wrong about just about everything since before the 2016 election is an insult to the readers and users of their platform. And we ought to go and file Federal Election Commission complaints against Twitter, because what they are doing is an in-kind contribution campaign to the DNC when they suppress and editorialize on the president's comments. The other thing we need to do is reform Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. A lot of listeners will not know that Twitter, Facebook enjoy privileges against lawsuits that this podcast does not enjoy, that your local newspaper does not enjoy, that CNN and Fox News do not enjoy. And they get those because purportedly they are supposed to be unbiased, neutral platforms. But that's inaccurate.
Okay, go. I want to go to 230, and then you jump in. By the way, Zero Hedge is still banned by Twitter. We were taken down for 2 days because of its comments about the Chinese Communist Party and about the virus. Zero Hedge, which I think
I only got you fined by the FCC. I didn't get you in Twitter jail.
So hold it. So go back to 230. What is it? Why do they have it? Is it because they've got every lobbyist in town? The audience should understand. Every law firm, every lobbyist is signed up by these guys, so people can't fight against them. They got the biggest lobbyist armies around, these big tech companies.
Absolutely. And I've got a great segment on big tech and the fusion that they have with the CCP in China on Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz that I hope people subscribe to.
Which, by the way, you are 85 spots ahead of Joe Biden. So that's pretty impressive.
Wow. See,
because the Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz is not a proof of life podcast. That's where you actually get some information.
That's right. But what we're talking about is the extent to which these U.S. technology companies are not putting our country and our people first. They're actually working with China. A lot of in Xinjiang province, where you see some of the worst human rights abuses, you see companies like Amazon, like Norton, these U.S. companies that are doing the back-end authentication and web services and email services for the CCP, and they are American companies. Would we have allowed American companies to go do work for Hitler's Nazi Germany, for Russia during the Cold War? But yet we allow these American companies to go and build out the back end for China, and we act like that is not an America last thing.
How did they get this Section 230, and what privileges do they get that you don't get on your podcast and we don't get here?
Yeah, if we defame someone, if we slander someone's character, we're going to get sued for that here. But Twitter and Facebook and other digital platforms, they have this special carve-out in the law, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, that says, well, because they're not editorializing, because they're not contributing to the conversation itself, they're merely hosts of the conversation, that they do not get that liability. And that has allowed them to really
That's so laughable.
It's so laughable, but it allows them to squeeze out of the marketplace a lot of the local newspapers and a lot of the places where some of us go for less biased information. Raheem?
It's laughable philosophically, and it's laughable in practice as well, right? Let's take this example specifically. If they are adding something to the president's tweet, they are de facto editorializing. Somebody is sitting there serving as an editor-in-chief now, pulling in different articles, that's what editors do, pulling in different sources and attributing them to that post from the president. That is not being a platform. That is being a publisher, right?
Absolutely. And I think that we need a legislative fix to this to define the editorializing out of this immunity protection, but we also need enforcement action. And I think under our existing laws, this is an election violation. If they were a billboard company and they put up a Joe Biden picture and wouldn't put up a Trump picture, or they put up a Trump picture and underneath put this person isn't truthful, that would be an in-kind contribution to the Joe Biden campaign. They would find themselves in enforcement action before the Federal Election Commission. So why can't we take those very same legal concepts and apply them to the digital age? President Trump should start calling out the FEC for not action against Twitter and the work that they are doing to disadvantage his campaign.
I've got a question on this for you as well, because I think a lot of people have heard about 230 and other things to this as well. My question is this, and I'm just, there's an article, there's an op-ed on Daily Caller right now by a former congressman, Bobby Schilling. And he writes that if they're going to do this, the question that we need to be asking is, who watches the Watchmen? And what is the feedback mechanism? By the way, do we know who the person is that literally clicked send on that fact check thing that's under the president's tweet? And don't we deserve to know who the person is? Don't we deserve to know so we can look up their election history, their donation history, anything like that? And by the way, how many people are there? Who has control over the most powerful person's Twitter feed? Are there 10 people? Does Jack Dorsey have to sign it off? Are there 50 people? Are there 100 people? And what is the HR process of hauling someone into line if they step out of line? Did anybody
It's just
get
Marianne Williamson with a Ouija board. That's actually what it is.
But these are really weird, things that nobody seems to talk about. Do you have any opinion on
Well,
this?
so Josh Hawley makes the argument, my friend, the good senator from Missouri, that if they're going to take on the role of a public utility, this great public purpose of
Let's regulate them like a public
of
utility.
litigating truth and falsity, then precisely under that line of thinking, Raheem, we ought to have the transparency that you called for.
Company directors have to be publicly known, right?
100%.
So what, does there have to be a list that people can search of who has the ability to change the messaging of the president of the United States? I would say there has to be.
Okay, I want to pivot into one more thing, is that, in 2016, there was this firestorm building on the internet because the Trump movement had no money. President Trump's campaign had no money. She had $2 billion. We had a couple $100 million. So we call them laughably the Pepes, but there were all type of people on Facebook and Google and everything else. They've had this huge move over the last couple of years on artificial intelligence to broom all that. Where do you stand right now with Google, Facebook, and the rest of these massive tech companies and what they can do, not just in this election, but to change the American conversation?
Well, they're getting too much power, and that might not be the most libertarian thing in the world to say, but they have now reached a market space where they are trying to define the nature of truth and change the way that we have discussions. We have tools, though, to fight back. I would like to see the Department of Justice become a lot more active in the enforcement of antitrust laws in this country. And where these tech companies are using their market advantage to limit speech, to deplatform speakers, there are specific ways we can use our antitrust laws. We're not going to get a bill through Congress ever on this because you're right, Congress is bought off by big tech, but a few brave people in the administration could do a whole lot.
But do you think that's where Makan Del Rahim is going? I mean, all the indications are he's going to go and file something on the antitrust front this summer. Do you think that happens?
We've had a lot of productive discussions on that. No time like the present. I mean, don't we have an election in a few months? I feel like we need to be working on this before the cement hardens. And frankly, when it comes to the Congress, there's a bit of a generational challenge we have. I don't think that the boomers are going to solve this problem for us. I think we need more millennial leaders in Congress to come
That
together.
understand tech?
Well, frankly, when you got Senator Bill Nelson, in his famous ask of well, if Facebook sends me a chocolate ad, is that an intrusive thing to do? And I'm just thinking, okay, boomer. I mean, we need more young people who understand that this is the fight. If we do not win this fight, if we do not have a fair fight for our populist conservative values, then our country will slide away
When
from
you say
us.
populist conservative, if you listen to a lot of what Bernie was campaigning on, it's about this concentration of power,
Yes.
particularly in tech and media. Isn't this something like we just had Buskirk on from American Greatness about manufacturing? There's a convergence of thought of the American people about bringing manufacturing back here for our national security.
But not the U.S. Wouldn't it be nice if the U.S. Chamber of Commerce actually had, advocated for U.S. businesses? Because I saw the U.S. Chamber of Commerce put out a statement opposing the re-domesticating of businesses to the United States of America. Maybe they should just change their name to the Global Chamber of Commerce.
But isn't that what's changing? How do you balance between your free market? You're a free market capitalist, right? How do you balance that versus the concentration of power of you're either going to have to break them up, or you're going to have to regulate them. How do you balance that?
I believe in a free market, but as we have gone over in great detail, it is not a free market when some platforms get special protections and special immunities designed by the government that other people don't get, right? So this is not a level playing field. These tech giants and the fact that they've got a gazillion lobbyists for every member of Congress, they have tilted the scale so that they can shape our conversations. We won 3 Rust Belt states by about a point each. That's why Donald Trump's president. We should not think that these folks can't have a substantial impact.
Can we keep? I know you got to go. Can we keep one more segment, or you got to bounce? You tell us.
I can stay one more segment. My mandatory congressional sexual harassment training doesn't start for another 30 minutes.
Okay, so we'll keep it for one more segment. Take a short break. By the way, the podcast is called Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz. No, I had to do it because that would be 7 pitches you had, which is this guy's
6 is my limit.
No. Gaetz, here's why you're a role model. This is what I say for the rising generation role model. Look what you've done. Nothing is inevitable. Through human agency and human action. Matt Gaetz down 30. Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz will return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
During the Madeline Peltz Hour in Media Matters, we got Matt Gaetz here, Congressman from Florida. Matt, I want to ask you about your overall view of the economy, where you think we stand. We've heard a lot of different things. Every now and again we get Kevin Hassett out there saying, hey, it's going to be Great Depression type numbers, but we're going to come back from it. Peter Navarro's on there hammering, hey, jobs. We got to bring things back. Larry Kudlow's talking about deregulation and tax cuts. You're not just one of the biggest partisans in Congress, you're one of President Trump's most vocal supporters. Where do you think we actually are on a macro basis for the country with the economy? And then I want to talk about Florida.
I'm a realist. I also think that the most telling macroeconomic condition is the fact that we've just poured $9 trillion onto the economy through Fed policy and spending. And Steve, normally you would expect a substantial amount of inflation when you pour that amount of money on. But with the global liquidity crisis we're in, the U.S. dollar keeps getting snatched up. And so it's interesting to me that we're not seeing that accelerated inflation, and we are using Fed policy for the provision of our people. I do not believe that we're going to go from this 20% unemployment range directly into a snapback of the economy.
You don't believe so?
I do not. I think that the transition to greatness is going to be a transition, and I think that the principal question the president has to frame is, who do you trust to bring America back?
We'll talk to this. The $9 trillion, you break it down, roughly $3 trillion fiscal and about $6 trillion for the bazooka of the Fed.
Right.
And $9 trillion. Where do you stand as a member of Congress with Nancy Pelosi's? Do you believe McConnell came out today and said, hey, we're going to need another bridge to get across the chasm, right? Nancy Pelosi's you're the member of the House of Representatives. She's put forward a $3 trillion bridge. Where do you stand? Do we need something? Do we need another spanning device to get us across the chasm? What size and what should be the makeup?
No, I believe that we will need another bridge, but I'd sort of like to keep building the one that we've already appropriated the money for. Today, House Republicans got an update from our colleague French Hill that out of all of these Fed facilities that have been set up, there still is not even 50% utilization on some of the capacity for those facilities when it comes to municipal liquidity, when it comes to some of the large business access points to that Fed policy.
You're saying to the support of the asset classes, we have not used all that. You think part of that is because some of the conditions that were put in there, that some of the businesses said, hey, I might want to do a further review of this, Boeing and other guys, about potential bailout of securities?
I think it's okay that it hasn't necessarily been an immediate rapid pouring of cash because it's allowed us to limit some of the fraud. I think that, you saw a tightening when Mnuchin came out and gave guidance that if you don't need this money on Paycheck Protection and you're taking it, you have a short amnesty to give it back, but then otherwise we're going to come after you. I mean, I had businesses in my district, Steve, that did not suffer one diminution in revenue, but who went and applied for Paycheck Protection because they were technically eligible. And so I think that you're seeing a rebalancing of that. Actually, more money was coming into the Paycheck Protection program than was going out during one point for that very reason.
Let's leave the Fed aside. As you look downrange, do you see some sort of bill coming through the House and the Senate that can be worked out? It's got liability insurance, everything in the June, July timeframe. Is that where you put it, and what size you think it's going to be, and what's going to be the big component pieces?
Right. We have to have additional legislation, if for no other reason, to fix this place where in some states people arbitrage the unemployment benefits and get paid more to stay home than to go to work. That's a disaster for our economy and for our workers. So there are things that absolutely have to happen, right, for like a June, July bill. And then what Pelosi will try to pack into that is hospital funding, which some Republicans are okay with, and then also a bailout for large municipalities and blue states that were having challenges well before coronavirus as a political payoff. I mean, look, remember, the Democrats understand like the Chicago ward-style system. You pay off people with money who are loyal to you, and I think that you'll see the Democrats who run the House of Representatives try to do that for some of their mayors. One mayor not just mayors, but governors. One governor that's in trouble is the governor of Michigan, who seems to be taking precisely the opposite view that we've taken in Florida. They are almost at war with their own citizenry, whereas Governor DeSantis has done things a lot better.
Let's talk about Florida. Let's talk about, we've discussed this, about open should be rapid, smart, and safe. DeSantis seems to be kind of a role model here. Walk us through his mindset. What has he done in Florida that's made it work?
DeSantis is a Yale man, a Harvard man. We won't hold those things against him, but he studies the numbers very carefully. And one thing we've noticed is that you just can't look at the macro aggregated data. You got to go community by community at times, and you got to look at travel flows and patterns and where you have hotspots of the virus. Also, what's been very helpful in Florida is the surveillance testing and the sentinel testing, going on offense against the virus in places where there's high probability of community spread or where there are vulnerable populations. But the national media, they came down on DeSantis like you wouldn't believe. They said we'd be the next New York, that he was crazy for letting people out exercising on the beach. And then as DeSantis has reopened, the same wave of criticism, and time and again, he's followed the numbers. In Florida, each and every day, the governor posts the percentage of people testing positive. It's down in the low 2s right now, percentage-wise. We think we'll be able to contain it. And one thing I could say is, like, in my district, once we opened the resorts and opened the hotels and the vacation rentals, I mean, people came. There was a whole lot of social and maybe not as much distancing under the great Florida sun.
You're saying the pent-up demand was pretty amazing.
It was. I mean, look, when you lock Americans in their house with their spouses and children, they want to get out.
Liability reform. Is this something you're hearing about from a lot of the businesses in the district? And do you think on the Hill, a couple of Senate Democrats seem like they might be open to it, but I can't imagine Pelosi ever allows that to get out
with
of the
the
House.
with the trial lawyers.
I mean, I think that we should have liability reform, but let's be careful here. Let's remember who we fight for. We fight for the people of this country, and I don't want to be in a position where some business is able to exercise like gross negligence or just say, well, we don't give a damn, and so we're going to put our people at risk. So I'm for liability reform, but in a way that puts the people of our country first, and that just doesn't give business an ability to have blanket immunity no matter what they do to people.
Let's go back to your district, though. Let's go back to the opening of these resorts. How do you balance off? If somebody comes back later and says, "Hey, I got COVID because I was down at a resort," or I went to a restaurant. Governor DeSantis opened up, and I saw the rules, and they had mask on, but I still got it from there. And they're going to come back, and these strike lawyers, Rifkin, we had Rifkin on the show when he put forward that great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that actually said gross negligence, right, to raise it up. And he said, hey, what nobody's talking about, there's tens of thousands of lawsuits that have already been filed in state courts and federal courts already about this. Mm-hmm. You're going to be overwhelmed. I mean, you're a lawyer. You know what's going to happen here. How do you balance that now? Understand we're supposed to look out for the people, but how do you actually open up these businesses if you don't address liability reform? And the president can't sign an executive order. Rifkin's version, it's got to start in the House. You guys have got to wrestle with this first. So how do you work through it?
there are existing legal doctrines on the standard for an invitee into your hotel or restaurant, and the standard is higher than if I have a restaurant. The standard of safety has to be higher than if I just invite Steve over to my house to hang out with me for a little bit. And so I think that raising that standard for someone to be able to bring a lawsuit is a good thing. I just want to be sure that we can't just bumper sticker this thing where you just say no one can ever be sued no matter what they do, or invite every trial lawyer to sue every time someone gets coronavirus. I think going to that gross negligence standard is the right way to put the thread through the eye of the needle.
I want to turn to Michigan. If you go back 6 weeks ago, and particularly on the national mainstream media, if you looked every night, Ron DeSantis was getting pounded. One thing I love about DeSantis, he's a little bit of a honey badger. He's got that Yale and Harvard smarts, but he's a naval officer. He just hunkers down. And the highest ratings, I think, were the governor of Michigan, Governor Whitmer. Now it's a different situation. Walk us through your analysis of what she's done versus what DeSantis has done and where that's going to head for Michigan.
It's typically not a good thing if you're auditioning for vice president and members of your own party and your own legislature are suing you. Not a good look. And I think with Whitmer, she has been so captivated by the notion of being a national media darling.
You think that went to her head?
It totally did.
Why do you say that?
Well, because, she saw Biden say he was definitely going to pick a woman. She's from Michigan. And frankly, it becomes this feedback loop in the media where people kept saying, oh, well, it's, she's on the short list. And so she played into that. And I think she abandoned the needs of her people who wanted to engage in commerce, who wanted to see clear standards they could follow and get out of their homes. Whereas in Florida, you saw Governor DeSantis almost ignore the national media, not play into their hand, and instead say, I'm going to go, region by region, zone by zone. I'm going to look at where I've got hot spots, where I need surveillance testing, where I need a medical capacity. And now in Florida, we are prepared to lead the great American comeback because we had smart policy that wasn't guided by the, mainstream media minds inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C.
I think there's also a lesson here for politicians. DeSantis went out of his way not to engage with the national media. He was very focused, even the national conservative media. He did some Fox stuff like that, but he was very much kind of going his own way. You could tell he was thinking something through at this time. She was everywhere. She was nonstop, and understanding she's trying to become vice president. But it looked like she jumped the shark because people forget we won Michigan. And one of the reasons we won it was the 12,000 votes. And remember, 80,000 down ticket, didn't voted Democrat, not for president. But those UAW workers, a lot of the union guys are NRA members. This is a culturally quite conservative state when it comes to when she shut down the lakes and the hunting and going out. That's when she jumped the shark, right? Because that's all of a sudden you've got, as we now realize, her own husband, was a boat guy, wants his boat in the water, right?
But I got to ask Jason this question. Republicans oftentimes take the George W. Bush approach of just letting the media define them. And DeSantis did the opposite. He wouldn't let himself be defined. He went out there and in that great video we all saw on social media, gave the media the business. What lessons from a communication standpoint do we learn from the DeSantis approach to actually getting out there and defending himself with the data that's available?
No, I think what Ron did was great. He went out there on an almost daily basis and he said, here are the metrics. Here's what we're going through. In a lot of ways, Ron very much channeled his inner Rudy Giuliani with the daily updates and saying, here's where we're bringing in the experts. Here's how we're following the science and going through this. And the other thing with Ron, too, and some of this is just kind of his personality, never got flustered. Like he's very, very calm, collected. Here's what we're doing.
Actions have consequences. If the actions had not had the positive consequences, he had thought this thing through, they would have torn him apart. He had a set plan. And I think one of the most amazing things he did, given all the other issues, Jack Maxey in the last episode, we're getting back to the next segment, talked about 53% have been in nursing homes. When the mainstream media was first on DeSantis, they go the firestorm in southern Florida in those high rises and on the villages. DeSantis is going to get blown out because you're going to have mass casualties in that. It didn't happen because DeSantis was on top of it. His action, he was very honey badger, laid out every day, and his actions that he took had positive consequences. And this is a guy that thought it through, whereas she looked like she turned into a media darling. This is, I think, the great lesson is that don't let them define you by taking action. It's the signal, not the noise. If you take actions in crisis like this, bold action, like President Trump, when he's taking the bold actions, good things have followed.
Yeah, and the reporters are not your comms directors. And that's the thing with Ron. Ron could care less what's on the front page, the Miami Herald, the Orlando Sentinel. He could care less.
So tell us about the podcast. Why are you doing it? We got a minute here. Walk us through. Why did you decide to do a podcast?
I think the news of the day opens the door into a lot of the issues that we face in Congress. So I've got a podcast, runs about 20 minutes each day, Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz. I do it every weekday.
And how do you select the topics?
I go to the National Pulse and I read what's up with the U.S.-Sino relationship. No, I mean it's the issues before the Congress. It's the issues before the country. I think I have a unique perspective on it, and I hope to engage and excite a new generation of young conservative populists.
What about feedback? What kind of feedback have you gotten so far?
One person said that they would rather eat an AIDS sundae with coronavirus sprinkles on it than listen to my podcast. But
you didn't have to tell them what I said.
Yeah,
Is that Madeline?
Madeline Pouts, we just found out they've unionized now. They're going to unionize Media Matters. She now gets straws to short and stick. She gets to listen to Matt Gaetz every other day. Matt, Congressman, thank you so much. Been fantastic.
Thank you, Steve.
I say, for a rising generation, you're a voice that must be listened to. Okay, we're going to turn it back. Jack Max will be back. We'll be back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Remember, it was a global pandemic that triggered an economic inferno, and that triggered a financial crisis and now a geopolitical crisis. Never in American history, and I mean ever, has there been as much uncertainty as there is now. There is uncertainty everywhere. Fortune favors the bold, and the bold are entrepreneurs. NetSuite by Oracle. This is the information package. It's the software package you need as an entrepreneur. They've got 7 action steps you need to take immediately as a business person. You got to go to our website, go to pandemic/warroom.
Pandemic.warroom.org.
Pandemic.warroom. And on there, you can see the click-through that you get to the NetSuite site. So remember, fortune favors boldness. And if you're bold, that means you've got the temperament to be an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, you need NetSuite by Oracle. We're incredibly honored that they're a sponsor. I want to go now to our Madeline Peltz at Media Matters. And we want to say, first off, I come from a union family. My dad and grandfather helped start the Communication Workers of America before it was named that back in the 1930s at the telephone company. So I come from a union family, love unions. Glad to know that Media Matters is unionized, and so Madeline gets a vote whether she's got to listen to us or not. I take she responded.
So Madeline Peltz, Media Matters, has responded to our gentle heckle from this morning, and she says, "To the War Room boys." Men.
It's men, and it's not fun. Madeline, you're right. You picked it up. You picked up immediately. She's very perceptive.
She says, number 1, we're unionized. Number 2, I was the one who first proposed picking up the show because it was obvious you guys were ahead of the story. Thank you. Number 3, I do listen to the weekend shows. That's Descent from Hell and Descent into Hell. And then number 4, we're probably going to drop monitoring it soon. You've kind of lost your edge.
Okay, Madeline. She's throwing down. No, she's throwing down. Okay, we're gonna.
Yeah, this is like the.
I keep saying the same thing. We got to get edgier. We used to be the cutting edge of this, and then you let Jack Maxey start talking about hydroxychloroquine.
Well, I just want to. All the cutting edges we've had to row back from a little bit. I'm just saying.
This is like the end of the dentist system where Madeline's deciding to separate completely. But Madeline, we know you're addicted. 7 days. I don't even listen. She
should come
7
on the
days
show.
a week.
No,
You
she should
listen
come on the
7
show.
days
I
a
want
week.
Madeline on the show. We want more progressive voices. We want particularly more Democrats. We're trying to do this in a way that draws in. This is what Gaetz. We're trying to draw in. This is Buskirk. We're at a moment in this country's history. Politics is being redefined. Republicans and Democrats, progressives and right-wing reactionaries. Something's happening, and something's happening big. And that's why, quite frankly, we want the folks at Media Matters to listen. And by the way, bang us up when we should be banged up. We're the first to say, hey. And hashtag War and Pandemic, we get a lot of good, I would say, observations, right, about what we're doing wrong. Fact checkers, we want that. We're trying to make this show an information source as you go through this global pandemic, as you go through the economic inferno, the financial crisis. Remember, one of the things I'm most proud of, we've been on Birx and Fauci, not from a traditional right perspective as they know Hillary Clinton or they gave to Bill Gates, but there's not enough metrics. There's not enough data. There's not enough science.
Well, I mean, to this point, I'll just address this to Madeline. We would love it if Media Matters would go and pick up, say, the IHME. numbers shifting around, because I think we can all agree that we want to see our elected leaders presented with the best information possible to guide their policy decisions to keep people safe, but to also reopen. We want the scrutiny into things like these numbers.
This is the reason, too, because Fauci today said there's going to be a second wave. In every one of these pandemics, there's been the second wave has been bigger than the first. In China right now, they're arguing, is what's happening up in Harbin or the 100 million, is that the first wave that didn't go or the second? We need the modeling and the sophistication to be, when you do the therapeutics, when you do the mass testing, when you do the antibodies testing, when you also do the sequestering of what Madeline got us on this yesterday, of the elderly, of the prisons, of the meatpacking. We got to be so smart for wave 2. The first thing that starts in is the modeling correct? Is it the guy at Stanford that says the former New York Times guy that says they're all wrong and everything? Let's get the best, and then let's force the administration. I want CDC to have its model. I want to be able to look at that model every day like DeSantis, be able to be up there and to judge it.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting going forward and the potential for a second wave, we obviously know where the mortalities lie in this, right? The people with comorbidities, et cetera. I mean, just in Italy today, only 4% of the mortalities did not have one underlying significantly life-threatening health condition.
When you say significantly life-threatening, are they saying high blood pressure? Because there's a lot of guys walking around with high blood pressure or stress or go ahead.
Breaking news.
Pompeo?
Yes.
Okay.
Jason?
Go right to it. Pompeo finds Hong Kong is no longer autonomous from China. Bloomberg has a teaser up. The U.S. has certified that Hong Kong is no longer politically autonomous from China, move that could have far-reaching consequences on the special trading status former British colony has with the U.S. This is big. Pompeo just said this.
We said this tomorrow's show. We'll go into depth. And by the way, I believe that we should go in hard. I gave it in the interview of the weekend. I gave one last night to Taiwan TV. We got to go in hard. And here's what I think the big reveal is going to be. They're not going to care. You're going to pull trade status. You're going to do the sanctions just like we did in Iran. I think you do primary and then you do secondary sanctions on the bank. You cut them off from the dollar. They're going to sit there and go, we hear you. That used to frighten us a few years ago. We're going to hunker down. Hong Kong, 7 million free men and women hold British passports, and now they're going to be inside the firewall, okay? Because China's understanding that freedom and democracy is a bigger threat to them than lack of capital and lack of technology.
And a lot of people wondering about what's going on the India-China border. This plays into this as well, right?
Huge. This is all the chess pieces. Listen. It's Hong Kong, Taiwan, South China Sea, because that means South Korea and Japan falls. But trust me, Australia, where China's throwing down right in their face, in India, absolutely essential. Modi's the guy I think the guy in that region they fear the most, right? And remember, one of the reasons is as messy as it is in India, it's 800 million people voted, right? It's 1.3 billion people. It's the largest democracy. It takes them a month to count the vote up, but this is what China can't have. They can't sit there and say, look at free men and women in India, right? This is 1938. And what Pompeo did right there, the President of the United States, this is going to be big. And we've said from day one, this is the Chinese Communist Party. This is 1938. This is Czechoslovakia. We're going to stand up. Now, here's the difference. Even in standing up in Czechoslovakia in 30, if you didn't send Neville Chamberlain, and you didn't do that, they're going to sit there and tell you, hey, we hear you. We don't care. We're going to control the Eurasian landmass. We don't care if we had 10 years of no growth.
The State Department has just popped a full statement. We'll get it on the War Room Pandemic Twitter account right now.
Okay, go to the website, # War Room Pandemic. We're going to be back tomorrow morning with Hong Kong, China, everything about the pandemic, the free men and women in Hong Kong. We're praying for you every night. American action about to take place. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow morning at 10.